Folks, 21st century caveman here. Hope everybody's well, hope everybody's happy. So we can see that I'm in the gardening again, and from the top left hand corner you can see an array of tools on the garden table. I've been cleaning those, so I had a few hours to spend and just thought I'd take the opportunity just to get ahead of the game really, clean my tools up so they're good to go the next time I use them. So I'm on my plastering tools now, and I've decided to start with one of my plastering trowels. Now the trowel you can see on the screen is a carbon steel trowel made by Marshalltown. So this is one of your sort of more traditional makes. They're well respected in the building trade rather. But anybody who knows anything about carbon steel will know that it does rust very readily. And when you make a trowel from carbon steel, and you're plastering with it, obviously a big component of plaster, there's going to be water. Water will make this rust very quickly indeed. So if you buy a carbon steel trowel, you've got to be prepared to put the work in, to keep it in good working order, to keep it clean, after you've used it every time. You've got to put some work in basically, and if you're not prepared to do that, then you need to consider something like a stainless steel trowel, which will be a lot less likely to rust. So I'm using the Black & Decker mouse on this, and I've got 3 or 4 different grades of sandpaper. So I'm starting off coarse and working through to the finer grades. If you start off coarse, that will actually remove a lot of the plaster, but unless you go to finer grits, you're just going to make big gouges in the steel, which obviously isn't a good idea. So we're actually changing over from the coarser grit now to a grit which is finer, and I've actually just cut these from sheets of sandpaper. They've got the hook and loop on the back. I've just cut them around the mouse, just cut them to size, cut them to fit, and they work absolutely perfectly. And if you make your own, then it's a very cheap way of actually using sandpaper on a device like this. So as we can see, this is starting to come up really nicely now, but as I say, you do have to be prepared to put the time in. Now, if you're using gypsum plaster, now actually we can see from the footage here that the Black & Decker mouse has given up the ghost. It's basically gone kaput after 4 years of hard abuse. So I'm having to resort now to basically a little bit of elbow grease. So I've got a sanding block and with some sandpaper on it. Now after a very short time I decided that it wasn't perhaps the most sensible thing to do to try and clean a sharp plastering trowel on my knee. So I've actually decided to use a bit more common sense, just stick it on the bench, because these trowels do become very, very sharp indeed with use. So as we can see, this blade is coming up absolutely lovely now, but we haven't finished yet. Now these blades, so the trowel we're looking at the moment, I believe is a 13 by 5 inch. Now you can see down the middle of the blade where the rivets are. So now there are sort of carbon steel trowels out there with the Marshalltown name on, which you can pick up from 20 quid for about 20 quid or less from stores like B&Q, but you'll find that the blades have not been riveted, so they're not going to last 2 minutes basically. So yes, they've got the Marshalltown name, which suggests that they have a good pedigree for quality, but unless they've got the rivets, you're just wasting your money on those. Don't buy them basically, they're cheap rubbish and just made for very amateur DIY use, but they're not going to last basically. So we're on a much finer grit now, and this blade is really starting to look really, really good, and it's becoming very smooth indeed. Now you'll notice near the spine of the in the middle of the blade that there is some plaster residue there, and the reason you get the residue and the reason it's so hard to get off is because the sort of plaster which we use here in the UK is made of gypsum. Now gypsum is a very hard material, and you know it's incredibly difficult to get off, which is why it's so important just to try and make sure that after every use you clean these trowels down, because it does require a little bit of effort to remove those gypsum deposits on there. So basically we're on the final hurdle now. I'm just wiping off any crap from the blade. The blade's looking absolutely lovely now. So before I put it back into storage, I'm just going to treat it with some WD-40. You know, just put a nice layer of WD-40 on there, which will prevent it from rusting and keep it in tip-top condition. So just make sure you cover everywhere, basically just rub it in, and then, you know, do the same again, but don't rub it all off. Basically you need to have a little residue on there. You can sort of chewed up the hand a little bit, look, cleaning the plaster off there because I wasn't, you know, being careful enough. But you know, the trowel is now back in perfect working order, so just a light wipe off, look, and we're good to go basically, and this trowel is looking absolutely beautiful. There we go, sorted. Job's a good one. It's looking lovely. So next time we have a plastering job, it's good to go. So there we go, look, a very productive day, another tool cleaned.